Guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about, can you learn medical billing and coding if you have comprehension issues? If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. Okay, guys, so I put air quotes around comprehension issues because this was a question from a viewer and these were the words that she used. So I'm going to read her question and then I'm going to read my responses, because this is something that if you are wanting to learn medical billing and coding, it's going to take a lot of study. And that is the truth. That is the bottom line, honest to goodness truth, is that you do have to learn a lot. We have to learn medical terminology, anatomy, pathophysiology, and pharma. Then we have to learn ICD-10-CM and CPT and HCPCS and ICD-10-PCS if you're learning that. We've got to learn about medical law and ethics. We've got to learn about medical reimbursement. We've got to learn a lot of different things. And so I always tell people that if you're interested and you want to do this, you shouldn't let anything stop you. Because there's people in this industry that have all kinds of conditions and that have overcome learning challenges and they have learning disabilities and they still do this. So if this is something that you want to do, then you will find a way. So let me read her comment and then I'm going to read my comments and then I'm going to get into it. So here we go. So the viewer says, can someone who has comprehension issues do this job? And I said, why do you ask that? So the person says, I have comprehension issues as far as forgetting what I read and retaining it. I am a hands-on learner and a visual learner, and seeing it and being able to do it is how I learn. I am also a bit worried about passing the test as I have extreme test anxiety. Not even in it yet, not even learning about it yet, and already is worried about that. So I said this. I said, do you think I retain everything that I read? Sometimes I have to reread stuff again. That's why you practice. I know you, if you know you are a hands-on learner, great. That is why there's coding workbooks that you can work through, and there's your hands-on learning. You're a visual learner, there's videos on YouTube about anatomy, medical terminology, pathophysiology, HIPAA, OIG, reimbursement, and on and on. You can look them up for yourself. My point is, if you want to do it, you'll do it. And there's no such thing as extreme test anxiety, which I wholeheartedly believe that. There is no such thing as extreme test anxiety. That's a lack of preparedness. That's all that is. That's all that is. And I'll get into it in a minute. You study 20 hours per week, and you can find my video where I talk about setting up a study schedule, and you can do it. That is my firm belief, is that if this is something that you really want to do, that you need to put in the time to do it, number one. Number two is this is not something that you're going to learn overnight. And no, I absolutely do not believe that anybody has extreme test anxiety. This is simply a lack of preparedness. This is simply a lack of you not going over the material enough and practicing enough and trying to race through this test. That is all that is. There is a very teeny tiny percentage of the population who has a serious issue with this. But for the rest of you, it is because it is a lack of preparedness. That is all that is. But I have good news for you all, is that if you're putting in the 80 hours in a month, which is 20 hours per week, you will not go through this. Yes, you will still have those butterfly feelings and that little bit of nervousness. But this is something that you know going in. You will understand already how to code, what these words mean, and how to figure out this stuff. You will already know all of that walking into that room. So that should give you more confidence when you are walking in and getting ready to take that test. People get hung up on, oh, I've just never been good with tests, because you don't know how to study so that you can feel prepared for these tests. And as I've said, is if you are studying 20 hours per week, all through your program, you study 9 months, 12 months, or 18 months, and you do 20 hours per week, do you know how much that is? And that's the thing. That's the thing right there. And for those of you who think that this is impossible, it is not impossible. If you are studying for 9 months, right, that's 720 hours that you will do in 9 months of study. You don't think that all of that time that you have spent going over the guidelines, working through the word problems, looking up the codes, getting those practices in, you don't think that all of that combined and all of that study that you did, that you're not going to be prepared the second you walk in that door? And again, it depends on which certification exam you're sitting for. The CCS, which is the gold standard of medical coding credentials, the CCA, the CCSP, and these are with AHIMA, and there's the CPC with AAPC. All of these things are all testing on medical coding. And that is the bulk of all of these exams, is the medical coding. All of the other stuff, the reimbursement stuff, all of that other stuff is all supplementary. The rest of it the majority is going to be the coding. And if you are actually taking the time to work through your workbooks, look through your books and actually sit with your coding manuals and look at them and work out with them, you will be ready. You will be ready in that time to be able to walk in and be able to take your test and be prepared. I do not promote shortcuts here on my channel. That is the number one thing that I do not do, because if you learn slowly, you will be fast in the future. It's those that are trying to rush through and get through a stupid quick program that's like maybe 4 months. Heaven forbid it's 2 months. Oh, but that's all I could afford. Meanwhile, you know that if you had done your research, you would know that the CCS, CCA, CCSP, or the CPC, none of them require you to go through a formal program. Not one of them. All you have to do is pay your fee and take the test. AAPC requires you to be a member of their association. AHIMA does not. But they do have separate prices for members and non-members with AHIMA. With AAPC, you have to be a member before you can schedule your exam. So that's an additional fee. But that's a whole another video for another topic and another time. The point about this is that if you want to get into this field, it will require you to study. And you could come from a background of having a high school diploma or a GED. This does not require you to have a medical background prior to getting into it. It does not require you to. The reason that it's important for medical coding students to learn about anatomy and medical terminology and pathophysiology is because when you are looking up the codes, it is important for you to understand that you're in the right area. A lot of these, some of these anatomy parts sound the same. Coracoid and coronoid. The gastrocnemius muscle. You would think, okay, gastrocnemius. Okay, that must be in the stomach because I see gastro in the beginning part of it. And when actuality, it's part of your calf muscles in your lower leg. So that's the thing. There's things that you're going to learn in medical coding that you have to learn because of medical terminology, anatomy, and pathophysiology. You have to learn all of those things so that the coding part can make sense to you. And it is possible to learn all of these things, but you have to get out of your own way. And this person is, unfortunately, to me, it sounds like they're getting in their own way because they've got the excuses down. Oh, I don't know if I can comprehend things well. Do you know that there's people that have been in the industry for years, and I see them post on, social media, and some of them can't even put a proper sentence together, and they're still in it. And there's sometimes when I see some things that from some people that they don't care how they write things, they're just going to write whatever way they want to, and they expect people to take them seriously. Really? And so you're worried about comprehension and being able to retain what you read? there's times when I'm reading things and I have to remind myself over and over again, okay, it's this, it's this, it's this. Or sometimes if I know I'm struggling with something, I have to put up a sticky note so that I can remember myself. Everybody goes through this. Everybody goes through this. It is a thing with our brains that we go through. And especially as we get older, those things do happen. And it even happens to young people, okay? It even happens to young people. Because trust me, sometimes when I'm talking with a young person and they say, oh, I forgot. Okay, you forget worse than I do. You forget worse than I do. But everybody forgets. There's just a lot to this field. But here's the thing though. If you're going to get into this and you say, you know what? I know it's a lot, but I'm going to go ahead and make a commitment to doing this. Then you're going to stick with it through thick or thin. Right? Thick or thin. And you are going to be there and be present in those times when you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to read this again or whatever. Here's the great thing about your brain. Your brain is constantly thinking. It is constantly working all the time. So when you are doing things that are repetitive, because that's how adults learn. I still work with this same female surgeon, but a female surgeon that I know said a few years ago that the key to adult education is repetition. That was one of her key things that she always said. And that is true. And sometimes even for my surgeons, for my PAs, I have to remind them constantly about things, about documentation and making sure, did you remember to put your laterality on there? You got to make sure you put laterality on there. And that is something that is so basic, but in our day-to-day, we tend to forget things, sometimes. And that's just what happens. It doesn't make us bad people. It doesn't make us bad employees. It just makes us human. So once you learn to accept that about yourself and say, okay, well, I'm not going to let that stop me. I'm going to go ahead and stick with this. Then you do it. It makes me sad when I see a potential loss of people's confidence right away because they start thinking too far ahead. They start thinking about, oh, I have extreme test anxiety. I have this and I always forget. Well, then that's when you start writing things down. That's when you start building discipline. That's when you start building grit. That's when you start doing all of those things. And trust me, if you are working through your workbooks like I've been telling y'all, right? And I know that's the theme this week, is to work through your workbooks, work through your coding manuals. That is the theme for this week. But the reason that it is because this is where a lot of people, this is where the roads diverge. From those that want to just get in, get out, and then get out in the real world and learn in the real world. That's not the place where you learn. The real world is where you will learn, but it is not the place where you learn. You learn in the school. You learn on your own. That's where you learn. And those that are taking my advice, when I say, okay, when you're working through your workbooks, make sure that you cover up the answer so that way you can see just the question and that way you can work through and see if you can get where, okay, like I understand what I'm doing now, or this is the codes that I got, but the book says this, okay, this is where we're disconnecting. So this is where I've got to learn this. There's ways to do this. But again, it takes you to be present and it takes you to be putting in the time in order for you to get what you want. Nothing in this life that is worth anything is easy to get because then anybody could be able to do it, right? And you don't want to be out there with a credential and you feel like you don't understand what the heck you're doing. If you feel like that, then that's when you know, hey, I've got to continue to study. And if you say, well, Blue, I got my certification, I don't need to study anymore, you're on the road to ruin. Because when it comes to coding, the codes they update. It's not a drastic update, but there are codes that do get added. There are codes that do get deleted. There are codes that do get revised. Okay? And because of that, it's always going to evolve. It's always going to change. And it's the same thing with the insurance policies. They're always going to change as well. And sometimes they go through several changes in a year. But as a coder, you just need to make sure that you understand the guidelines and you understand, what's required, The billers are the ones that do the other side with the billing side. But again, with that said, if you feel like this is something that you want to do, then you shouldn't let, comprehension get in the way. Do you know how to critical think? Which is actually looking at what you're reading, spending time with your books, and actually like reading the guidelines, doing your research instead of asking somebody who is a student like you who maybe doesn't know or understand but doesn't want to look stupid. Because there's a lot of people like that. They don't want to look stupid. Or they tell me, "Oh, Blue, you make me feel so stupid." Why do I make you feel stupid? Because I called you out for not actually studying like you're supposed to? I'm only trying to help you. I'm only trying to help you. And if you're listening, and if you say, "Okay, Blue, I'll go ahead and do it your way." You know how many messages I get from people who say, "Oh my gosh, Blue, the 20 hours per week, it works." Because you're actually investing that time in to learning it. Because again, this is not something you're going to learn overnight. And it will not be something that you can learn in 4 months. It will be that it will take time to build. You know, doctors, they get 10 to 15 years to be a doctor. They get all that years of school, fellowship training, and all of this. And they're doctors. But they study for years to be specialists in their field, to be able to do certain things, certain procedures, or whatever the case may be. And again, this is something that we learn over time. And, you know, I've had people say, well, I'm working in a tutoring session or something, and they'll say, because I'll flip to whatever, or I'll say whatever, or I'll spout off whatever the answer is, or I'll say, "Okay, I think it's this code," and then we'll get to it. "Oh wow, Blue, I wish I could be just like you." This is hours and hours of study, and years. You're talking to a 17-year veteran. You're talking to a 17-year veteran. That's what it is. Time and attention, cultivation of my skill, of what I do, and not taking any bull from anybody because of it, right? So if this is something that you want to do, you will not say any excuse like, "Oh, my comprehension, because I forget stuff." I forget stuff too. It's a human thing. But the more you practice with it, the better your recall will be. The better your recall will be. I have a coworker who can recall specific codes. It is the weirdest thing. I can recall codes because it's repetitive for me. She can recall codes the instant I tell her, "This is the code." And it'll be a few minutes later when I would have naturally forgotten a new code that I was told. She'll recall it. She'll recall it the next day, and then the day after that. I mean, she does it instantly. And I just look at her and she says, "Shut up, Blue." Because she's so good at it. Everybody has their talents. Everybody is different. Everybody is unique. Every single coder is a different caliber. But using the excuse of, "Oh, well, my comprehension," is an excuse. "Oh, I have extreme test anxiety," is an excuse. That is an excuse. If you are studying 20 hours per week, 80 hours per month, 720 hours by the time it's all said and done in your 9 months, or if you get to those 800 hours of study, you will not be anxious about one thing, because you will know those books forward and backward. It is those that are trying to rush through and make every excuse, and "Oh, I always get nervous. Well, your brain's gonna be like, "Oh yeah, sure, we're nervous. We're not gonna pass this test," because that's what we're being told to ourselves, is that we're not gonna do it. It's a waste of time, folks. It is stupid. It is stupid to think of yourself that way. All the potential that you have, throwing it away. Because I have extreme test anxiety. There is no such thing. So don't even say it. Don't even say it. It is a lack of preparedness, and you spending time with the book will alleviate that. It will completely get rid of that whole thing. You will not be nervous walking into that room. Not so nervous that you're going to, not do well on the test, because it will be very familiar to you. Working through the workbooks, looking at your coding manuals. And I've done demonstrations before about opening up the coding manuals and looking at them, because all of your answers are in those books. This is an open book test. An open book test where you can use your manuals. You will have access to the coding guidelines. So there's no need to remember everything, right? To memorize everything. Just work through it. Use your books. That's all there is to it. That is the one thing that we have as human beings, is the ability to critical think. And because we have that ability to critical think, we will always be a step ahead of technology, because it's not going to be able to look at something and decipher it and figure it out, because it doesn't have the ability to critical think. It's looking for terms. It's looking for ones and zeros, because it's code. It doesn't think. It doesn't think. And I will always promote critical thinking on my channel. I will always encourage you to look at the guidelines, to read them, listen to them, go through your coding manuals. So that way you don't have all of that. People that are scared of the books, people who typically fail those tests, it's because they were not studying, or they tried to cram at the last minute, or they want to blame their teacher because, oh, well, I got into this program and I paid all these thousands of dollars and I was supposed to have an instructor and they didn't help me. They have your money. The rest is up to you. I'm not saying that all teachers are bad. There are some that are very good. Do I know them personally? No. Do I promote their schools? Absolutely not, because I haven't been to these schools. But I do know instructors, and some of them are really good. And some of them are just there to collect a check because they don't want to try. And they expect people to learn from reading instead of doing their job and actually teaching. And teaching is a wonderful profession, but there are some people who should never be allowed to be an instructor. And that is the truth. I'm just saying. But with that said, if you are a visual learner, do yourself a favor. There's YouTube. There is YouTube. And YouTube has channels like Crash Course, which I love. There's a ton of other anatomy channels. You can type in anatomy and you'll see hundreds come up. But by far and away, the best channel for learning anything related to anything you need to learn in school, anything you need to learn for this, medical terminology, anatomy, pathophysiology, Crash Course has it all. And these are 8-minute videos, 10-minute videos, some are 15 minutes. They have a whole playlist of all of them. You can just start your playlist while you're washing dishes. You could be listening to it. Hank and the crew, they have these really entertaining little videos, and just listening to it will help you to retain that information. And that's your visual learning. That's your visual learning, okay? And so there's that. There's, again, listening to it where if you're an auditory learner, that's one of those other things. You're a hands-on learner, then you need to be working with the workbooks. Or going through your Optum book. If you have the Optum book, which I recommend, Optum ICD-10-CM and ICD-10-PCS, they also have that book. These are two separate books. And these are acceptable for taking to your exam, okay, because you do get a choice of publisher for your ICD-10-CM manual, your ICD-10-PCS manual, and your HCPCS manual. The only manual that we all have to have, whether you're sitting for an AHIMA or AAPC exam, is the CPT book, the CPT Professional Edition by the AMA. That is the only one we all have to have. But other than that, you have your choice of publisher when it comes to ICD-10-CM. And why do I recommend ICD-10-CM from Optum? That one is published through Optum. Why do I recommend that? Because again, if you watched my video a couple weeks ago where I broke it down, there's all of those Before every single chapter in the tabular section, there's the copy of the guidelines specific to that chapter. There are examples in every single one of those. And I've recommended covering up the answers because it has the answers and the rationale. Covering up those answers and the rationale and looking up those questions in the book. So that way you can get practice through every single one of those chapters. And as far as I know, Optum is the only one that does that. I have an AAPC book and they do not have that in their book. They have other things, okay? Again, every publisher is going to be different. But the AMA and Optum ICD-10 PCS, in the back of that book, if ICD-10 PCS is on your exam, say, for example, you're taking the CCS or the CCA, right? In the back, in Appendix M of the Optum book, or in the back of the AMA book, there's going to be a list of 388 ICD-10 PCS procedures. And I recommend going through that and looking up every single one of those procedures, because they have that, and then they have that with the answer key in the back as well. So they have a blank version, and then they have the version with the answers. So you can look those up, and that will give you practice. Tell me you're not going to be prepared going through all of those 388 procedures, going through all those questions throughout the chapters, and then taking the time to look at those chapter-specific guidelines as you're going through the book. And tell me that you won't be prepared for the coding portion. Because everything else is not that big a deal. You still need to know about reimbursement, yes, but it's not that big a deal when it comes down to it. The big deal for these exams is that coding knowledge and skill. If you have that, if you're able to look up codes, if you're able to understand like these guidelines, you're going to be able to be successful. And like I said, you try to get to those 720 hours in those 9 months, or if you get 10 months and you're at 800 hours, that's fantastic, and you will not have this test anxiety. There will be no such thing for you. But you keep making excuses and you don't do it, and then you see what happens. Because you won't be ready. And even if you do, by chance, pass the test, doesn't mean that you're going to understand a lick of anything when you're out there in the real world. Because guess what? They're going to test you in the real world before you can get hired. They even test veteran coders. If I was to apply at another place for a coder position, they would give me an assessment test, because everybody has to make sure that you know. But again, that's the only way you're going to be able to be prepared. So stop making excuses, okay? Because let's just be honest, if we're all adults here, we know when we're making excuses, right? So stop making excuses, start studying, opening up your book, opening up the coding manuals, okay? If what I say upsets you, let it upset you enough to the point where it motivates you to try to prove me wrong. Go ahead. But it's doing what it needs to do, which is to get you motivated, okay? Because know this, I am telling you all of this because I want y'all to be set up for success. I do not want y'all to be set up to fail. This is my advice anyway. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.